What's up, guys? Thanks so much for clicking on the video. My name is Leah, and let's recap and review Real Housewives of Miami. This is season 7, part 3 of the reunion. I know I'm late. Y'all know I was on vacation. I was like, I don't know if I should finish it, but I was like, hey, we already reviewed part 1 and 2. Might as well review part 3 and complete the season, okay? So let's get into the video. So y'all know sometimes before we get in to the review, we get a little spicy just a little bit. And I just have a few things. Well, no, I don't even have anything to talk to y'all about. I did a standalone spicy corner. I called it Spicy Corner Central, mainly because I talked about all the shows I reviewed, such as Real Housewives of Orange County, Potomac, Salt Lake City, and Miami. I did pin, the pin comment is a timestamps. So if you specifically just want to know what I thought about certain things that came out in the press about Real Housewives of Miami, such as Gertie versus that crazy social worker, Julia social worker, as well as Andy spilled tea, that we were only supposed to get a 2-part reunion, which after watching part 3 makes sense. And Carmen Carreras, who we saw on the show, talks about this little tiff she had with Lisa. So if you're interested in that, check out the link in the description box below. But let's get into the review. All right, y'all, so let's get into this episode. So it opens up and we have the continuation of Lisa versus Larsa. There's a question posed to Lisa by a viewer that says, how did you feel about Larsa saying, if your father's not going to make it in a week, why are you here walking in this fashion show? And Lisa gets emotional and she basically says, my father would have wanted me to be in that fashion show because he would have wanted me to sparkle. So then the conversation continues on with Lisa getting frustrated with basically everybody on stage except for Andy, saying that not only did everybody pile on me this season, nobody checked to see if I was okay. And then Kiki, Larsa, and Marisol are like, hold up. Kiki's like, I know I sure contacted you. Marisol's like, no, I think I called and texted you. And you hear Larsa say, girl, Lisa, I texted you. Like, what are you talking about? So then Lisa was like, I had so much empathy for what happened to Alexia with the loss of her mom. She was like, Alexia, I threw you a party. And so they show us unforeseen footage of season 4. It's 2021. It's 2 days after Alexia buried her mom. And then Lisa threw a party for her, but Alexia didn't go. I was surprised that Alexia didn't say nothing because we know how close Alexia was to her mom, that I was just like, girl, because I know the way that I love my mom. I would have told Lisa, tread lightly before I cuss you out. Like, choose your words very carefully, because I would have been like, your relationship with your daddy is nothing of what I had with my mom, and the grief hits different. It really does. And I also don't think Larsa was, like, she was wrong for saying what she said to Lisa about, like, girl, if your dad's not going to make it in a week, why are you here? But I can't chastise her too much because I said the same thing when Lisa threw out there that it's like touch and go with her father. Like, she was like, we don't know if he's dying, if he's not dying. And I'm like, then why are you in Milan about to walk in this fashion show where you're not a headliner, you're not opening the fashion show, and you're not closing it? You're meshed in between all these other models. Like, there'll probably be other fashion shows that you can attend and be a part of. If it's that important for you to spend the final moments your father has on this earth, then you would have made a way to go to Canada. Clearly, Jody has the money and you somewhat have the money to make a plane flight to Canada and make sure you have that time with your father. So again, Larsa rude for saying it, but I can't chastise her too much because I thought the same thing. I just would have had common sense enough not to say it to somebody, okay? I'm not mean like that, all right? But Larsa is. So the conversation shifts because you hear Lisa just say, like, nobody really, like, was worried about me, which I also think is a lie because, girl, they checked up on you. I feel like, what did you want from them? Because the way that they have been having your back since season 5 and season 6 is wild to me, because I'm like, girl, you were the focal point for 2 seasons. Everyone was like, oh, I hope Lisa's okay. We have to make sure Lisa's okay. We're going on this trip for Lisa. Lisa needs this time. Like, you were like, they were always making sure you were okay. So granted, they could have did a better job with this situation, but let's not write these people off like they weren't there for you in your time of need dealing with your tumultuous divorce. So They then start talking about Lisa sending the picture of her father in the casket to Larsa when they were arguing throughout text. They show the flashback scene of Marisol being like, girl, don't show me that. I don't want to see that. And I'm Marisol. I have blocked people for posting that online, especially on Facebook. I don't want to see that. I don't want to see your dead relative like that. So Larsa basically says, because Andy ends up asking her, how did you feel about that? She was like, we weren't in a good place, and she was just trying to make me feel bad for what I was saying. And Lisa's like, yeah, I was trying to make you feel bad. So then you hear Alexia say, okay, girl, enough, Lisa, we get it. We get it, girl. like, girl, we get it. Enough is enough. Like, we get it. And everyone's like, Alexia. And I was like, yeah, girl, that was rude. That was rude. So then Lisa hits Gertie with a stray where she's like, so we're allowed to grieve her cancer for a year. We're allowed to grieve a divorce for a year, but we can't grieve my father. And I said, girl, what did Gertie do for you to hit her with that stray? I told y'all about Lisa. Y'all don't want to believe me, but I see Lisa. I see her. So Lisa just basically says that she doesn't really like open up to the group anymore because she was like, I wonder about my reactions and the way that I react to things. But she's like, I do so because nobody is asking me any questions about how I'm doing or where I'm at with things, which I also think is a lie because people have asked you that. They have. Everyone's always worried about Lisa and Lenny and Jody and things of that nature. But I can understand she's frustrated about the father thing. So then Alexia was like, well, she was like, that's my point. Not everyone's asking the same thing for everybody. Like, I see what you're saying. No, Alexia, no. Because everyone asks you as well, how are you doing? Out of everybody on this cast, I would say Alexia and Lisa are the main girls who everyone is always asking and wondering if they're okay compared to anybody else on these casts. Anybody else, okay? So I'm just like, neither one of y'all, I get it, y'all are upset, but y'all are not victims in this, in my opinion. So next thing you know, they start talking about the Jody of it all. And like I said, next is Jody, Lisa, and Larsa in the whole text message situation. Andy ends up asking, like, what really went down in the elevator for y'all to be arguing that way and for Jody to be texting? He was like, we didn't have cameras in there. So Julia basically tells Larsa, hey, I'm going to have to be honest with you. You snapped off at Lisa. Lisa responded to you, and then Jody started texting you. Gertie chimes in during this conversation basically saying that I think the big issue was the severity of like the insinuation that Jody was doing something or on something. And so they flash back to Marisol's wedding party where Larsa was talking about when they were in Milan and Jody got crazy the last night of Milan and he just started telling them that he didn't want Lisa or Larsa to be talking to each other. And so Lisa says when she saw that footage, she was disgusted. She said for you to go after Jody unwarranted was not right. And then she starts directing her energy towards Julia saying, and you, Julia, to be like, well, how big was his eyes? And Julia ends up saying, well, in my culture, in the Russian culture, when someone is describing a story about how angry someone is, they ask, like, how big are the eyes? Now, I will give Julia a little grace here because I do think in every culture there is, like, there's a culture there where it's like, oh, yeah, you do act like when someone's telling you a story, you do start to ask specific things. Like, what time was it? What was y'all doing? What was y'all drinking? Like, what was y'all smoking? Like, you do ask those things. But then I also understand Lisa not wanting to hear it because she puts her hand up like, girl, stop it. Shut up. Stop it. Because it's like, we just found out, Julia, you cheat on your wife and you're a liar. So I get it. So then Larsa ends up saying, like, I don't know what you're trying to get at, because she was like, just because I brought up that story, I'm not the one that insinuated anything. Your boyfriend is the one that was in y'all apartment talking about AC. She was like, that ain't got nothing to do with me. So they flash back to when they went to go check up on the AC. So then Lisa's like, it's air conditioning. They were checking the air conditioning. And you end up hearing Gertie say, well, they were cooking in the house. Gertie, stop. I'm sorry, girl, stop it. Because that was weird. That was weird, and it was giving ski slopes and powder.
I don't do cocaine. Sorry.
That's what it was giving. It was giving. Now, should they have tried to insinuate that he was on something? No, that was out of line and out of pocket. But I'm not gonna lie. They give like they do party drugs. I'm not. So I don't know. Larsa could have been telling the truth. She was telling the truth about Julia kissing on some man, and we found out she a cheater. She might be telling the truth with this situation. Okay, so then Lisa basically tells Larsa, you need to say sorry because that was effed up. And then Lisa says, I'm sorry for not unfollowing Marcus. My bad. But you have a lot of things that you should be sorry for too. So then Andy's like, so what do you want her to be sorry for? And then Lisa's like, where do I begin? And so then Lisa ends up saying, you know what it is? It was really hurtful. She was like, I hate to say it because I don't want to give you that much power. But she was like, there have been nights where me and Jody almost broke up because of our situation. And I said, girl, it was that deep for y'all. Like, don't get me wrong. Like, insinuating that someone could be on some substances is messed up. But I also thought Jody was like self-employed, but then again, that could mess with his business dealings as a businessman. So I understand that, but I was just like, it was that. I feel like there's other things going on between Jody and Lisa, and Larsa was just the cherry on top because I don't know about that. I don't know about that. So Alexia is shaking her head yes, because she knows that what Adriana said about Todd caused a rift in their relationship. And Jody's in the back listening. And so then Andy ends up asking Larsa, if you have the opportunity to apologize to Jody backstage, will you do it? And Larsa's like, yes. She was like, I'm not gonna make my friend upset anymore. Like, I will apologize. She was like, I want you guys to be happy. Like, and so then Andy ends up asking, like, can we move on from this? Because she was like, I want to talk about other things. Andy's like we can talk about other things now. So then the conversation shifts, and Andy's like, you know what, let's get off of this and let's talk about these fun trips that you guys went on. So then they start asking Lisa, how come you don't know Spanish, but you've been in Miami for the past like 16 or 17 years? Mind you, I don't think she should be fluent in Spanish, but I think she should know a little bit, like a decent amount. I know that I want to learn Spanish because I used to be able to read it like pretty good, but now that like I haven't really trained my brain to like remember things and I didn't keep up with it, I just know like specific words. Like I can listen to people speaking in Spanish and like hear certain words will like stick out to me, but like once it comes into a sentence, you lost me. You lost me. So they start talking about the way that Stephanie felt like Julia fanned the flames between her and Alexia in Spain. They flash back to when they got to Spain, and Julia immediately went to Alexia and was like, girl, we were talking about you. And Alexia was like, girl, I don't care. Y'all can F off. And so then Stephanie is like, girl, why would you tell her that, Julia? Like, why would you do that? So then Julia basically says that like she was just trying to be funny, like it was like cute. Like she wasn't trying to start anything. So then Stephanie talks about how like, girl, I thought we were cool because we went on this like double date, my husband, you and Martina. And then to do something like that was a little bit off. Like, that was a little bit uncalled for. And so Julia says, you know what, Stephanie, you're 100% right. Like, you're absolutely right. I was wrong. I shouldn't have said that. So then Lisa was like low-key on Julia's neck. She jumps in and she's like, where was this energy? Like, all this energy that you have for everybody else, but where was it for your two new besties? Because they didn't come to Marbella, but the rest of us did come to Marbella. So then Julia ends up saying this Seville was for Alexia. Marbella was for me. Like, for me. And so then Lisa emphasized it again, but it was so important to you and your new besties didn't go. So then Marisol made a clear distinction. She said, girl, we're not besties. Like, I'm getting to know her. We're getting to know each other. Like, we're not besties. I said, I know that Julia didn't pick up on that because Julia feels like they're her besties. But Marisol made it very clear, like, girl, she's not my bestie. I'm getting to know her. Chill out with that word. You know, Lexi is the only one on here that's my best friend. Okay? So you then hear Lisa say, no, you had a lot to say about me. And the rest of us like, what? Like, what's going on? So then all of a sudden, Stephanie just yelled. She was like, oh my God. And like, everyone's just kind of like, girl, like, what is up with you? Even Andy was like, she was just like, she was like, let me talk. And I was like, nobody was not allowing you to talk, Stephanie. What's wrong with you? So then she's like, is it really that bad to fly on Shoma Air? And most of the people said no. No, most of the people said no. Even Andy was like, no, I would get on the plane flight. And then she was like, are the rules really that bad? So then Marisol said, Stephanie, it wasn't anything about the rules. It was the way that you were trying to sit everybody. It felt like you were putting people in solitary confinement. So then Stephanie throws shades at Marisol where she was like, have you never been on a plane? You can't really have solitary confinement on a plane. So it flashes back to when Stephanie was putting everybody in assigned seats. And she did say if she feels disrespected, people going to have to drive home. So you get them there on a 20-minute plane flight and then threaten to leave people so they would have to drive 3 hours back to Seville from Marbella. And she was just like, I didn't want to do that. So then all of a sudden, Alexia says, girl, well, we knew something wasn't going to go right, or we felt like something wasn't going to go right because we had the dinner from hell. You were very upset about it and things of that nature. And it was what it was. So then Stephanie says, honestly, her real gripe is that she felt like Marisol and Alexia, but more so Marisol, was trying to convince everybody not to go on the plane. And Marisol was like, I was not trying to do that. You hear Gertie say, oh, she's such a liar. And then Alexia chimes in and she said, no, the circumstances was the three of us. And she points to Julia. And I think it was supposed to be Julia, where she was like, it was going to be me, Julia, and Marisol. Or maybe she was like me, Julia, Larsa. I think it was me, Julia, and Larsa. Because she said the three of us. She was like, we were going to take a train to Marbella. We were going to take a train to Marbella and call it a day. Like, we were considering doing that. So then Andy ends up saying, well, Stephanie, you consider Marisol and Alexia twins. You referred to them as twins at the Plaza de España. And so they end up playing this game with Marisol and Alexia where Andy ends up asking them questions and see if they respond to them the same. So he was like, Kiki's dad, hot or not? And they both said hot. Kiki said, okay. The next one was something about Stephanie. Is it creepy that she has all them cameras in the house? And they were like, yeah, it is kind of creepy. And then they were like, yeah, y'all are start talking about Kiki and the algebra equation that she put on the cake and all of that good stuff. Andy ends up asking Kiki, like, why did you do that? And Kiki basically says it wasn't meant to be like malicious, but she was like, looking back, I can see how it does look mean. But she was like, when she called me ratchet and I called her old, it was like she hurt me, so I was trying to hurt her back. But she was like, I really wasn't trying to be malicious with putting the birthday number on the cake. That wasn't what I was trying to do. But she was like, now that I understand that the age thing is really like she's really hurt by that. She's like, you know what? I'm really sorry. Next thing you know, Adriana started being like, I'm very sensitive. Like, why would you do that? And I was like, girl. So then Gertie is trying to rub her shoulder. What's her name? Lisa gets up to like coddle her. Basically, Adriana lets it be known that the last time she had a birthday was when she was 15 years old and it was her quinceañera. And she was just like, she doesn't like the way that feels. And then Marisol was like, girl, give me a break. Like, we're worried about you crying about being old, but you body shamed me and you age shamed me. You like, what are we doing? Like, where you basically said that I had old lady knees. You basically said that I needed to get plastic surgery. And so much so that, like, I was so self-conscious throughout the season that I wore pants the whole entire time. She was like, you told me my knees were old. Like, what are we talking about? So then Andy does ask, he was like, so for you being so sensitive about your age, for you to say that she has old wrinkly knees, don't you think that that's kind of like you're contradicting yourself? And then you hear Marisol say, and she called me an old whore. Okay, so then Adriana admits that like her intentions were to hurt Marisol because Marisol was trying to hurt her by like not including her and stuff. And Marisol basically says, no, I was trying to remove my presence away from you because you don't like me. You don't like me. And so then Adriana's like, it's not easy getting old. And so Marisol's like, well, girl, what you said, like, girl, like legit, like I'm thinking about getting knee surgery. So then Kiki's like, Andy, did you hear what she said? She's thinking about getting knee surgery. Gave her the look I did. I was like, girl, what kind of knee surgery? They do that instead of like, I know knee surgery when we're like actually scraping out the cartilage in your knee and like, because the joint has worn down and everything. But I'm like, what are we doing for the skin? And so Marisol explains to Andy, it's this thing called Nuvino, where it's a procedure to make your wrinkly knees not look old. And I mean, her knees don't look bad. They look like knees of somebody who is 58 years old. And so everyone's like, your knees don't look bad, Marisol. But she did get it done. And I talked about that in the spicy corner. Honestly, I don't feel bad for Adriana. And I said that in the spicy corner. Like I said, ageism exists, lookism exists, pretty privilege exists. Because if Marisol calls Adriana old and like was going off on her about that, y'all would be calling Marisol everything but a child of God because y'all think Adriana is prettier than her. Lookism. Because people who are seen as less desirable normally get the harshest treatment when they bite back at people in fights or bring up valid concerns. Pretty privilege. It's weird that everyone's giving Adriana all this grace about her age, but again, she contradicted herself by lashing out at Marisol. On top of that, the way that y'all have tried to absolve her from calling Kiki ratchet, no ma'am. And then ageism. Again, it does exist. We see how Hollywood treats women as they get older and some men as they get older. So I'm not saying these things aren't real, but it's hard for me to feel sympathy from somebody who used ageist digs and body shamed somebody because you wanted to hurt them, but somebody puts your actual age on a birthday cake and tells you you're too old to be acting your age and you're having a meltdown. Girl, shut up, Adriana. Go somewhere and sit down. Okay. So we then see that they are taking a break. We actually see that the person that's taking care of Adriana's dog is her makeup artist. I hope Adriana gave her a hefty tip because that's not a part of her job description to make sure she takes your dog out to go piss and pee, like poop and like feeds him. That's not her job. Her job is to make you look pretty. Okay. We then see Jody and Lisa in her dressing room and she's just like, I want Larsa to take back what she said and to retract like her accusations and things of that nature. And Jody's like, you're doing really well. You're holding your own. And Lisa was holding her own against Larsa. So then we see Larsa go into the dressing room and Larsa basically says that her and Lisa haven't been in a good place and pretty much she was sorry for roping Jody in all of this. And she basically told Lisa, you could have called me if anything I said really hurt you. But we also know that Lisa don't pick up her phone. Lisa also said that she would like to have another conversation with Larsa when it's not about the reunion. But we know where they're at now is not in a good place. So clearly they never had the conversation. But at least Larsa apologized to Jody for roping him into the chaos that is this show. They hug and they move on. So they get back on, on the stage and everything. And next thing you know, they start talking about the conversation that Larsa and Lisa had. And Andy said, did your conversation go well? And Lisa says, it meant a lot to me that she apologized to Jody. It was a very nice talk. And Larsa says, when we hang out, we have a good time. And she pretty much says she missed being around Lisa, so she's willing to move forward. We then have Gertie's segment about her breast augmentation and her reconstructive surgery. They end up asking her, how has she been? And where is she with her health journey? She gets really emotional and we see Russell in the back, but basically we find out that she's no longer doing any more reconstructive surgery because her goal is perfection, but that's never going to happen because her body is different, dealing with having cancer and then all the chemo. But she's learning to, she's learning to be happy with what she has. And everyone's like, okay, that's great. That's great to hear. So the conversation continues on and they start talking about, what happened to her as a child. And she explains that, in their community, people don't have a lot of money, but they're trying to get everybody overseas at a certain point in time and make sure that they have the best life possible. So my parents picked me and my brother because we were the youngest. The older kids, not so much because they were in school at the time. So, it's 7 of us and me and my brother got picked. They sent us over to a family member and pretty much she was just like, we were in a house, we couldn't really go outside, my parents were saying they were coming back to get us. After a while, 3 months have passed, you hear Marisol say, that's terrible. And she was like, the people weren't that nice, so it was scary. So she was like, that whole situation that happened between her and Julia kind of re-triggered her, because she was like, the isolation and the abandonment of that. And they were like, is that why you felt that way about Julia? And she was like, it wasn't specifically isolation and abandonment. It was like the degradation. Like, it felt degrading, like it felt as a child. So then Julia apologizes again, basically saying, you know, I'm sorry, and like, I didn't mean it that way. And Gertie explains it was the symbolicness of like, you just throwing a drink on me, like I was like trash. Like, you just, that's how she felt being discarded as a child. So again, Julia apologizes, and Gertie appreciates her apologizing. She says, I appreciate you apologizing again, you know? And so the next segment is about Julia and the boys and her adopting them. Andy ends up asking, how old are the kids now? I think the oldest child is 4. We find out that Summer and him hung out together. They look like they could be siblings. Like Summer and the little boy Jax have really pretty little smiles. And she's just like, you know, the other little boy, Luca, is about to be 2 years old. So Andy ends up asking, so how are your daughters? He says, were they upset with the adoption because it happened too fast, or they weren't a part of it? What we find out is that when they got the approval that they could get the children, Julia was in Russia with her parents, which I was surprised that her parents are still alive, but they were in Russia with her parents, and I think Martina was somewhere else out the country as well. And they got the phone call basically saying, I shouldn't be shocked that her parents are alive. They're probably like in their 70s. Yeah, they're in their or maybe touching 80. Yeah, they should still be here. They should still be here. You know what's crazy? Todd's parents being alive. Because ain't Todd like 70? And Bronwyn's like 40? No, I think Todd's in his 60s. When he said he was checking up on his parents, I said, wow, you got both of them? That's a blessing. That's a blessing. So Martina was also out of the country as well. And then they only had like 4 days to get back because their home expiration was coming up, where their house was no longer, I guess, viable to like foster children. And so she was like, things kind of like the turnaround time was very quick. And so we know that Vika is the one that has met the kids, but Emma has met them on FaceTime. Andy ends up asking, how are their relationship with Martina? Vika and Martina have a better relationship than Emma. Emma is the person we need to talk to, because I feel like Emma would spill all the tea. So the next scene we have is of us finding out that Marisol's selling Mama Elsa's home. I'm not gonna lie, I was tickled when they showed that video of her in the house fanning herself. Here I am all alone in my house speaking to myself. That tickled me. That tickled me, because I was like, that's what the house is for you to be all alone speaking to yourself. It's your sanctuary, girl. But she had that crown on, that fan. I said, oh my gosh. So Andy ends up asking, like, is Mama Elsa like okay with this? And Stephanie was like, why wouldn't she be? And she was like, you know, did you talk to her about it? And Stephanie's like, how would she talk to her? And she was like, spiritually. And Marisol was like, no, she's not attached to that house anymore. We can let it go. So then they ask her about Steve. Like, would Mama Elsa approve of Steve? And she gets emotional, and she was like, yes, she would have. She was like, she thinks her mom sent Steve to her because she was like, her mom always said that she was going to marry a man with like chicken legs. And she was like, Steve has beautiful legs. And honestly, even though I kind of feel like they in a lavender marriage to a certain degree, Steve and Marisol seem to really be happy together. And he seems to really love and support her. And Marisol just gushes about how kind and compassionate and caring he is. So I think Mama Elsa would have liked Steve as well. They then start talking about a montage of the women calling Marisol manipulative. So they do the whole thing about Adriana saying that Marisol with her dry knees and, you know, her cubic zirconium and her fake Birkin and like, you know, none of that is going to get rid of the evilness in her soul. Then you have Alexia throwing her under the bus about not wanting to fly on the plane, but her wanting to fly on the plane, but Marisol saying, stay with me. And then Adriana and Stephanie having a conversation where Adriana says Marisol uses her power of manipulation against people and all of that stuff. So then Andy ends up asking Marisol, you know, Nicole said that you hired a private investigator to follow her. And Marisol's response was like, prove it. Prove it. And then Andy was like, well, why would she say that? And Marisol was like, for listeners. And, you know, Gertie not going to let that lie down. So she rolled her eyes so hard. But I will say, I could see Marisol doing that because Marisol ends up saying, prove it or we going to court. But because I wouldn't put it past Marisol. But I also understand Marisol's response being like, prove it, because you can't just throw that out there and not produce proof that I was the one that had you followed. Like, why would I do that? You know what I'm saying? But I can see Marisol doing it. But also, I'm like, girl, there might be other people that want y'all followed. You just never know in this world. It's chaotic right about now, okay? So, they then start talking about how Stephanie thought Alexia was influencing Marisol, but now she feels like it's the other way around. Stephanie also talks about how it was very hard for her to listen to like all the backlash she got from the fans, saying that it was hard for her and she felt as though Marisol knew that and was purposely adding on to it by sending her articles about all the bad things everyone was saying about her. And Marisol was like, girl, I was trying to help. Like, I thought you should know that information was out there. And Adriana's like, really, Marisol? Really? And so then Stephanie was like, Marisol, I get tagged into things every day. I was going to bed every night thinking, like, this was the worst decision I ever made in my life. And Marisol was like, well, why didn't you tell me that? She was like, Larsa had to tell me to stop. Why didn't you tell me to stop? Because I thought I was helping. So then Larsa chimes in and she said, honestly, what I think it boils down to with you and Marisol is Marisol thought the four of us were going to be the best of friends. Me, you, Alexia, and her. And that's not what happened. You know, you wanted to get to know everybody else. And Marisol said, I encourage you to get to know everybody else. And then Stephanie said, so did Adriana after we had our lunch. So I'm like, so then why was there a need for Stephanie to throw out there that Marisol told her that Adriana was the one that was supposed to be the person you look out for. Yet now you're saying that Marisol also encouraged you to get to know everybody. And you also left out that you were the one that asked Marisol, hey, who should I be weary of? You know? So I was just hurt that you kept sending me that stuff. She was like, I just felt like you were trying to like hurt me. And Marisol was like, that's not the case. That's not the case. So then Andy ends up asking Stephanie, do you feel like Marisol is a safe space? And Stephanie says, you know, I think Marisol gave me great advice at that point. Even though at the time it didn't feel like great advice, but she was like, honestly, she was right. Like, not everything, especially on this platform or people on here, are safe spaces, which I feel like people find out new words and they use them incorrectly, because in my mind, a safe space is someone that you like, if we're talking about a person, is somebody that you like cultivate a relationship with like years, like not somebody I just met, you know, like a safe space person for me would be like my sister. Like we've been locked in for like since we were born. Like, I mean, we're not twins, but you know, like that is somebody I know I can tell my deepest, darkest secrets to, and she's not going to run to the internet. She's not going to like lay waste. People that I've been my best friends, I know they're safe spaces, but we have cultivated those relationships for years. So I don't understand why Stephanie is searching for that. Other than that tells me that Stephanie doesn't have real friends or a lot of friends beyond this show. So then the final thing that they talk about is the whole ratchet versus wretched thing again, but more specifically the revelation that Marisol was the one that told Adriana to tell Kiki the word you meant was wretched. I still believe that Adriana meant ratchet, and you ain't gonna get me to believe any different. I know a lot of people like Adriana, but I wholeheartedly believe that's what that lady said, okay? Especially with this revelation from Marisol, because my thing about it is, if you really did not mean that word, you would not have needed help from Marisol. You would have told Kiki, what I meant to say is that I feel like you're being miserable. But you needed somebody else to help you clean up the word. Nah, you meant what you said. You meant what you said, girl. So as they're sitting there, Andy ends up saying, like, you called Kiki ratchet, or did you mean wretched? Like, what did you mean by that, Adriana? Adriana said, I meant wretched, and I used it in the context I was trying to say was that she was being miserable. Kiki ends up saying, whether you meant ratchet or wretched, like, it doesn't matter. You still called me that name. So then Alexia jumps in, and she was like, Kiki doesn't care which word you use. Like, Like, I don't care. Like, you said the word. You said what you said. So then Stephanie starts barking like a dog because all of the women are talking at once. The way Lisa was like, girl, what's wrong with you? I was Lisa. I was like, Stephanie, what are you? Shut up. Like, what are you doing? So then Gertie jumps in and she was like, well, after hearing the definition and reading the definition of ratchet, Kiki was not being ratchet because she wasn't doing anything of that nature. And then Kiki posed a great question where she was like, my thing about it is, to use the word ratchet when you've been arguing with Marisol since the Roman Empire, and you've been arguing with Julia, and you've argued with Larsa, but you've never called them ratchet or wretched. What's up with that? Like what's up with that? Like, why would you use that word for me? And she said, that's why I got angry. And that's understand when people are fighting, they say things. She was like, I get it. But she was like, I was taken aback by Marisol doing what she did by helping Adriana, because me and Marisol were in a good place. So she was like, so to go behind my back and help somebody who said that to me is a problem. So then Adriana is trying her best to say, well, she used it to hold it over my head. You still did the thing. Like, that's what I'm like, what's not clicking, Adriana? And this argument between them showed how much Adriana and Marisol are alike, and also how much Adriana loves using Marisol to blame her behavior on sometimes. Because, ma'am, you still call that lady ratchet. She's telling you, it doesn't matter that you call me ratchet or you meant to say wretched. At the end of the day, you've argued with the rest of these ladies on these couches, and yet and still, you've never called them those names, but you call me that. Why? But all Adriana can do is say, well, Marisol was using that to hold over my head. But if you really meant the word miserable, you wouldn't need help cleaning it up. You would have just been like, Kiki, I meant miserable. I did not mean ratchet. I apologize. But the fact that you were and that crap you pulled with your friend talking about black girl to black girl, I know what you was doing, lady. I know what you were doing, Adriana. So she was like, that's the point. So then next thing you know, Marisol jumps in and she's like, girl, I tried to help you. And then you hear Adriana say, you tried to manipulate me. And it's like, no, she didn't, girl. No, she didn't. So Marisol apologizes to Kiki, saying that she was only thinking of herself. She was not thinking about how Kiki would feel. She was just like, I just wanted to get her off my back, and I should not have done that. And honestly, it's that simple. All Adriana has to say is like, I'm sorry. I did not mean that word. I meant the word miserable, and that's about it. But this like trying to shift blame, girl, you still said what you said. And you made it worse by bringing that friend talking about black girl to black girl. I still can't believe she did that. Oh, because I would have cussed Adriana out and her black friend out. Because how dare you? So they end the reunion, with the whole positivity thing and all of that stuff. I will say, when it comes to this season, I will give this season a C+. It wasn't horrible, but it wasn't great. There were definitely moments where I was like, yeah, we can wrap this on up, But I definitely think Dr. Nicole not being there shifted the group. And then what Julia did to Gertie and her behavior and the way that she switched up on Adriana shifted the group to a different place even further. I think it's time that we either let people go or we add people. Because right now we have 6 full-time housewives. So Larsa, Lisa, Alexia, Gertie, Julia, and Stephanie. I would be fine with letting Julia go. I'm cool. Let the farm lady go and we add like 2 new people and then we'll have 7 housewives and then 3 friends of. I do not think Kiki or Adriana should be promoted. I feel like a lot of people want them to be full-time mojito holders, but I'm just like, y'all, the way that people have been like dragging Kiki for the way that she behaved towards Gertie, I think having her in small doses will still allow her to garner like the success that she has, but I think having her in a full-time capacity would make it worse. It would make it really worse. And then I feel like giving Adriana a mojito, we would see more stunts and shows. Because I'm like, what else can Adriana give us? Like, I think as a friend of, she thrives. But I'm like, what else can she give us? Like, is she going to show her son on the show? Like, are we going to see her actually dating, not hiring a boyfriend? Because what happened to Amari? Like, what else can she give us? Like, same when you look at Marisol. Marisol gives us a cute little moment here or there, you know, and we keep it pushing. I think the three of them thrive in their roles. But yeah, a C+ for this season. If you watch this video, thank you for watching all of my reviews. I really appreciate y'all. So as always, remember to be bravely authentic. Definitely hop down in them comments below. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, and I'm out, y'all. Deuces.